The first movement is shoulder abduction and adduction. This movement takes place in the glenohumeral joint in the shoulder, along the sagittal plane and the frontal axis. Abduction is when the shoulder moves away from the body like this, and adduction is when it comes back. Abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction. This movement also takes place in the sagittal plane along the frontal axis. This is lumbar lateral flexion. This is when you move side to side with your, like this. Again, this takes place in the sagittal plane along the frontal axis in the lumbar spine. For this one, I've gotten a little closer to the camera so you can see it better. This is shoulder protraction and retraction. This takes place in the shoulder girdle along the transverse plane and the vertical axis. This is when your shoulders move like this. So front to back like this. Again, this is in the transverse plane along the vertical axis. The next movement is knee flexion and extension. Flexion is when you bend your knee like this, and extension is when you bring it back out. This movement also takes place in the sagittal plane along the frontal axis. The final movement is hip medial and lateral rotation. This takes place in the transverse plane along the vertical axis. This is when you move your leg like this. This is medial rotation, this is lateral. So when you bring your leg towards or away from the other leg. Again, this takes place in the transverse plane along the vertical axis. So the final thing is tensegrity, and this is my very simple tensegrity model which represents the human body. So as you can see, when I pull it, the pencils and elastics all move together. Same as when I push them together, everything moves. This is like the body. If you move it in one direction, everything is going to move. Same with the body. If I hamper one thing, like I've got my hand on one of the pencils here, it can still move, but it's limited. This is kind of like if someone injures their leg or something. They can still move, but obviously how they move will be limited. Like they'll probably be limping or dragging that leg or something like that. So again, I've hampered the pencil, and see, it can still move, but just not as smoothly or as nicely as before. So what happens, and just like the body, what happens to one thing happens to the rest of the body. So if you were to say, if something, say, happens to your arm, like I'm moving my arm right now, a whole bunch of other things in my body are moving. Just like this. Pull it one way, everything moves, falls apart. So that's the idea, that when you move it one way, everything moves. So yeah, that's tensegrity. The idea is when something happens to one part of the body, just like when something happened to one part of my now broken model. When something happens to one piece, it happens to everything. Everything in the body is going to move, just like on the model. When you pulled it, everything pulled. When you pushed it, everything pushed. So that's tensegrity, and it also represents how the body works.